Good afternoon, viewers. Welcome to the first edition of the Chit Chat with Father Sanyang. And today in the studios, I have a gentleman. He's a prolific Gambian writer who has written several books in this country, namely Don't Judge the Book by the Cover and several other books. So before I go further, I would like to allow him to introduce himself. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Fatu. It's my pleasure to be invited here. And I would like to register my heartfelt appreciation and gratitude to the entire management and staff of Eco TV, of course, the people's choice. Thank you. I am Modoulamin Age Musaf Sowe. My biological name is Modoulamin Sowe, but due to writing, I adopted a pen name back in high school, Age Musaf, which is a pseudonym and it stands for my parents. But Musaf is the name of the Holy Quran in Arabic theology. Basically, Modoulamin Sowe is just a very humble and hardworking young man from a very poor family background who is struggling to make a living at the same time contribute positively towards national development through writing.
Thank you so much for honoring our invitation. And before we go further, I know when you talk about life, you talk about achievements, but before achievements, there are struggles that you have to pass through before you be somewhere. So can you please give us a background information about who Emma Sowe is and what experience that you have whilst growing up?
Thank you very much for the very wonderful question. I started writing when I was old enough to spell, at the age of 14. I read everything that I could find, because growing in a very poor family background and having to be the breadwinner, it's very fundamental at that age to focus on my education. How I came into writing was a divine inspiration to transmogrify the human side, because humanity is human. And in order for mankind to be understood, he must be spoken about. There was a time when I was in primary school towards approaching the upper basic school. The book we were using was written by Charles Dickens, Great Expectations, a very wonderful book. At that time, there was common entrance, and education was excellent, and people were so hardworking. I thought it was important to have probably approach Gambians to write their own books so we could use Gambian books in our school curriculum. But when I went to school at that particular time, and I didn't have the book Great Expectations written by Charles Dickens, I asked myself, why are Gambians not using Gambian books in school? At the age of 14, I was very young to comprehend the tidal waves of emotion that was over me after that conversation. I said I was going to write a book. It was just a joke. But when I went to bed the following day, I dreamt that I wrote a book. I thought it was just a mere dream, so I ignored the dream. But when it occurred for 3 times, I knew this was not a dream, but it was a commandment. Because even in Islam, if you go to the Holy Quran in Surah Al-Zilzal, chapter 99, God said, "Bi anna rabbaka awha laha," for that thy Lord will give you inspiration. Inspiration can come in physical form, it could come in dreams. So I was inspired to be a writer at that tender age, because I noticed there were things happening at that time that I needed to address. I didn't even know where to start, what writing was all about. Prior to that, I used to write short pieces of poems and stories and essays. I wouldn't call them writing because it was an exercise. But having had that dream, and I remember anytime or each time I dream, the title of the book, Don't Judge the Book by the Cover, will surface in my dream. So that happened to be the title of my first book. It was a novel, but that's not the only book I've written. I'll come to that later. But basically what I'm trying to address is to emphasize on few things, like when I was growing up in Brikama, Wellingra and Kabafita respectively. At that time, there was an issue that had affected the nation vastly, and that was baby dumping. At that younger age, each Johnson, anywhere, dumping site you go to, you will see a plastic bag. Sometimes it could be a piece of cloth. A baby was wrapped inside and thrown carelessly somewhere. As an author, I noticed that society changes. Just like in the words of the Bolivian author and scholar Boaventura de Sousa Santos in 2014, he published The Cognitive Nexus of the System, where he calls on the epistemologists of the South to counter that narrative. That is the human side. The understanding of the mindset of the people and how they think must be written in books so that people could speak that language. What language do I have to speak for people to understand that baby dumping is something bad? How could you give birth to a child and go and dump it on the dumping side, or throw the child in a well, or sometimes around the riverbank? At that time, I decided to write the book, The Memories of Reflection, with a female character called Aissatou, a very typical Gambian name, who was thrown in the river, meaning she was dumped, and she was being adopted by an old woman named Mbakadi, who needed a child. So the book, The Memories of Reflection, was approved by the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education to be used in schools as a supplementary reading material based on the themes that I was addressing in that book.
Okay, Emma, thank you. Before that, what inspired you to come up with Gambian literature? Why literature? Why writing?
Thank you very much. I was inspired to write because I wanted to read books about myself. I wanted to read books that depict our behavioral and cultural aspect of the Gambian society. I was being fed Western literature. Most of the books that I read in schools were written by foreigners. I needed to read something about myself, and in order to do that, I have to write something about me, about my country. That served as my inspiration. But of course, I was also inspired reading the Holy Quran. Sometimes I am inspired when I'm heartbroken. And that doesn't mean people should break my heart. When I'm heartbroken, that is when I can write. Sometimes when I listen to music, sorrowful songs. Sometimes when I take a walk down the river, sit alone. Sometimes when I am very lonely and sad. It serves as my inspiration. But writers have rituals. Each and every writer you see has a specific ritual or something that serves as a catalyst to speed up his or her logic. Of course, what Pablo Freire calls in 1976 the defective logic of the system unassumingly, logically, to be in that psychological chai, to be able to write. When I'm in that state of madness and possessed and inspired to write, I find myself being possessed. Because my ritual is a whispering from the spirits, like the Nigerian author and best-selling novelist and feminist Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. When she starts to write, actually she sits in a circle, she lights red candles, and she falls into a trance. She recites an Igbo chant. The Nobel Prize laureate for literature, Michael Gabriel Garcia, he had a black cat before he died. He will take a walk with his black cat before he writes. Chinua Achebe also had a ritual. So most of these writers have rituals, but mine is a little bit different. I said, I read the Holy Quran, I read the Bible, listen to music. Sometimes when I'm sad or heartbroken, that is when I write.
Okay, thank you. You are giving reference to international writers.
Of course.
Let's come back to Gambia. So, which writer inspired you to start writing, and which writer do you look up to?
Thank you very much for the wonderful question. Looking at Gambian writers who inspire me, or those that are my favorite, when I started writing at the age of 14, I didn't know any Gambian writer by then, because I was so young at that age. I wouldn't have known there were Gambian writers. But as I grew up, I got inspired by few writers, the likes of Dr. Tijan Sala, Nana Grig Johnson, and of course one lady that probably Gambians have forgotten or don't even know anything about her. She served as my major source of inspiration. Her name was Rafina Philip Almeida. She was the first principal of the Gambia College. In fact, she was the reason why the Gambia had a college. The Gambia College used to be at the Yundum Barracks in the 80s, towards 17, So it used to be called the Yundum College. This lady was given permanent residence to stay in the US. So intelligent, a historian par excellence. But she refused and said, no, I'm going back to Gambia, it's my country. Education there is very poor. I need to do something to help my people. So she abandoned the US and all the luxuries and everything to come down to the Gambia and settle here. And she help us have a college. So she served as the inaugural principal of the Gambia College. Her name was Dr. Rafina Philip Almeida. She used to be a lecturer at the University of the Gambia before she passed away somewhere around 2018. That was when she passed on. You know, very, very sad. But she wrote a book, Kirio and Other Proverbs. Very nice book. It served as a major source of inspiration to me, looking at Gambian writers who inspire me. But outside Gambia also, there were African writers who also inspire me into writing. The likes of Femi Osofisant, the Nigerian playwright, because when I was in high school, I read literature, and one of the books I read was Women of Owu, written by Femi Osofisant, so he served as my inspiration. Of course, William Shakespeare too. That's why most of my writings are a little bit Shakespearean because of the language, you know. He inspired me a lot, so much. And the last person who inspired me was this American author, Paul Beatty, who wrote the book The Sellout, which stood out to become the Man Booker Prize winner for Western literature.
Thank you. It is important to know that there are Gambian writers that are doing immensely in the writing industry. But what advice do you have for young people out there? Because the reading habit in the Gambia is very poor. So people are writing, but if they don't have somebody that read the books, it's a problem. So what is the advice that you have?
That is Surah Al-Qalam, chapter 68 of the Holy Quran. God said, Nur wal Qalam, by the pen and what men write. O Messenger of Allah Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you are not by the grace of your God a madman. You and people who write are people of great etiquette and magnanimity. So writers have that power. They have the power of communication. They have a language to write about, whether it is in English, Wolof is a language. They have a topic or subject to write about, and they have an audience of people to receive what they write, to read. So it is very fundamental for young aspiring writers to read very hard, to read in the name of God, to make research. I didn't just jump and write some of these books. I cited an example of baby dumping. It was something happening. I have to go to the museum, I have to go to the libraries, I have to sit with griots and elders to find out, to hear their perspective of things to be able to write. Because writing and cooking, they share some things in common. What writing and cooking share in common is that they must both whet the appetite of their consumers. It's like when you're cooking benachin, you need some ingredients, rice, tomato, fish, egg, stuffs like that. If you don't have them, you're going to prepare chin chin, not benachin. So when you're writing too, you need to know the elements of literature, the elements of writing. You have to have a very strong background in reading. If not, it wouldn't help you.
Thank you so much. Everything that you do, you must have an impact, especially writing. So, have you written any book, and what impact has it made in the lives of people?
Thank you very much. Yes, I have written, almost all my books have made huge impacts on the lives of people in the Gambia and beyond, across Africa, the world at large, because in 2022, last year, one of my books, Don't Judge the Book by the Cover, was awarded the African Literature Award. So I became the first Gambian to win the African Literature Award. It was awarded to me by the International Association of African Authors and Scholars based in Atlanta, Georgia. And purposely, they look at the book and classify it under children's literature. Children's literature is dealing with children's books. So my book was able to impact the lives of children across the world. That includes Gambia too. So aside from that, like I said, I cited one of my books, The Memories of Reflection, was also able to have an impact because it was approved by the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education to be used in upper basic schools as a supplementary reading material. So meaning students in schools in the Gambia use the book for their literature syllabus, so that too has an impact. And of course, if you look at my other book, Africa Not Africa, I spell my Africa with K, not with the C, because the Africa with K, the K stands for Africana. It is the indigenous African people and their languages and our values and norms and cultures and tribe and identity. You know, that is the Africa of Kwame Nkrumah, Nelson Mandela, Julius Nyerere, etc. So I needed Africans to rethink and reevaluate themselves, to understand that if I can travel to America with a passport in English language and in in French, I should be able to travel to Kenya with my passport in African language, because I gave an economic valorization of our languages in my book. You know, don't judge the book by the cover. So in my poetry book, Africa Not Africa, I was looking at some of the things affecting our continent, ranging from too tribal, dictatorial, coup d'etats, a lot of things. That is why Africa has been labeled as the continent of pests and diseases for so long, you know, because we are termed as people who are backwarded and people who are subjugated to trauma. We needed an awakening, because in my book, I try to make people understand that there is a great difference between a rat and a rabbit, even though they share some similarities. I needed African people to understand that the word intelligent is not intelligence, and that which is relevant is not relevant at all. That is the awakening call I needed to give them. Because when I write, I look at critical subjects economically, politically, socially, and religiously that are cross-cutting across my country and the continent, Africa, where I am actually based and born, to be able to address these things. Now, if you go to Western societies, Western literature has reached a level where writers will just write a book about their dogs or food, because they passed the stage of development. They're thinking of human rights and other things, you know, medical bills and stuff. But in Africa, we don't reach that level. So it would be so ironical and paradoxically funny for an African writer to write a book about your dog because it's your pet, when you have other pressing subjects to write about. Now, my writing, when it is going very well, it is a whispering from the spirit. But when it is not going well, it is artwork and dedication and commitment and perseverance. And that is what makes the difference.
Okay, thank you. You have made mention of several topics like education, politics, agriculture, etc. Have you written anything pertaining to politics? Because in the Gambia, politics is a hot topic here. Everybody talks about politics. And if you have written any book, can it serve as a guidelines for Gambian politicians to use in order to help them function in office?
What a wonderful question. Brilliant. That is why the people's choice is actually Eco TV, because Eco TV asks questions that are fundamentally important. In the meantime, in response to your question, yes, I have written The Throne of the Gods, which is a play or a drama book that was published in the US in 2016. In my book, The Throne of the Gods, I said, leaders are chosen by God, not people. People can only vote for, elect, or nominate a leader, but they don't choose the leader. That is a divine act, because people, leaders, are chosen by Almighty God. Now, I was trying to address the political crisis across the African continent in my book. Let me hasten quickly to clarify with, of course, velocity that is unstoppable, that I do not belong to any political party in the Gambia and beyond. People know me with two things, learning and artwork. If you say ML, they will tell you Koku Janga, he writes a lot. That's what I do. But when I am being able to write something to address political situations and challenges facing my country and people and beyond, I am being struck in my praxis by the poverty of imagination, with lack of confidence and belief in my people. It became the tapestry of my art in terms of writing to address those socio-economic, political challenges that people are dumbfounded with. Because it reminds me of the poem, The Ambassador of Poverty. The Ambassador of Poverty, written by Philip Obion Omen, is a very prolific Nigerian poet who wrote The Ambassador of Poverty. He said, and I quote, "The ambassadors of poverty are our politicians, the people in power who prize our conscience, who will use the form M to trick us, to show us importation of sun and goods when their people see nothing." So The Ambassadors of Poverty is a poem that is inclusive. It has touched all spheres of walks of life in terms of politics. So my own writings are a similar thing, because I am trying to implore the provocation of critical consciousness in my work to be able to address things like poverty, things like electoral reforms, things like awareness and capacity building in terms of voter registration, because most of the African people are poor, especially the indigenous people, so they are not quite educated. And this means that they don't know their rights in terms of even voting. You know, I play a very neutral role in my books, but they are more of an advocacy tool, shedding light and providing solutions to problems. I'm very good at that. You know, I look at things that are affecting the populace as a general and try to address that in my writing.
Thank you. Another question, can literature solve issues? Can literature solve problems that people are facing? If yes, how?
Yes, literature, especially realist literature, have the power. When I say realist, it's from the word real, you know, something true. So realist literature in general can solve issues and problems, because literature deals with society, and society is people, because the people are the society, because a person without a voice is not a human being at all. A human being must have a say that is to be able to be called a human being. So therefore, let me quickly give you a rundown of some of the books that were used as a literature tool and they were able to solve critical societal problems. One, Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. At that time, when colonialism and imperialism, industrialism was mounted with pressure, Africans were nobody. There were no fences, no boundaries, no flags, anthems, nothing was drawn. People will come and enter and go anyhow. And Chinua Achebe, as a student, when he was growing up, he noticed that he wasn't happy with it. In fact, as a student, he was being tested in a book written by Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones wrote about Africa, but Mr. Jones' book about Africa was more of showing the barbarianism. It was more of showing the negative aspects of Africa, labeling Africans as people who were uncivilized. So Achebe wasn't happy with it. So in his book, Things Fall Apart, he has to give a reply, a response to Mr. Jones' book. You know, trying to say, look, we Africans are civilized. In fact, we have our gods. We have our traditional sport, wrestling. That was why Okonkwo in the book was depicted as the main character, and the traditional sport was wrestling. And in fact, you will see at the end of the book in Things Fall Apart, when somebody commits suicide, you kill yourself. In our tradition, in African tradition, you are not allowed to be buried. You should be thrown in the evil forest. When a public officer would be flogged in public. So those are some of the critical responses Achebe was able to give as a solution to African problems at that time to abolish slavery. So you can see Things Fall Apart was one book I spoke about which was able to solve that problem. Let me take you to Asia. Another Asian author who happened to write a very critical book which served as a catalyst to help people like Jack Ma. We all know Alibaba, right? You can go shop on Alibaba online and buy anything. The idea for Jack Ma, who is now one of the richest men on the planet, to come up with Alibaba was found in a book. Wow. Because he dropped out of school several times, you know. So he developed the habit of going to libraries. One day, Jack Ma went to the library and he read a book written by a Chinese author. And in the book, it was said that you could sit in your house one day and you make money. So Alibaba happened to pick that concept from the book, and he worked very hard towards thinking alongside that direction and created an e-commerce, you know, online sort of. And today he is classified as one of the richest men on the planet. So that shows the power of literature, how books could also address, you know, problems. Now, if you look at No Longer at Ease, you know, there are a lot of other writers too. People like Chinua Achebe, when he wrote that book, No Longer at Ease, in fact, he described at the end of the book that there was a coup d'etat, you know, and immediately the coup d'etat happened, you know, and it leads to uprising or demonstration in the country. The same year he published the book, there was a coup d'etat, so he was arrested. Ngudi wa Thiong'o, people like Wole Soyinka were also imprisoned based on their writings, because most of what they write depicts the reality, it's the truth, it's a prognostication, meaning a prediction of what was going to happen. So when that happens, obviously it affects society, especially if you are governed by dictatorship. Dictators will suppress you.
Thank you so much. I can see you're not only a good writer, but also a good public speaker. Can you tell us a little bit knowledge about your communication skills? Where have you learned writing books? Do you went to university? Do you have a BSc or Masters in literature? Tell us where this knowledge came from.
Thank you very much. This is a very fundamental question. I've never attended or been to any college, university, or school to learn how to write or become an author, never. But I read everything in holy books. I read the Bible and the Holy Quran, so I devoted my energy and time going to libraries, making research, and the library especially has helped me a lot because twice I worked as a librarian, one in the Gambia. When I graduated high school at Masrul Senior Secondary School, I was given the school library, over 50,000 books. I was the librarian, so I don't only classify and kept those books, but I read them. Now when I traveled also for my bachelor's, I also worked as a university librarian. I kept more than 100,000 books in that library. So I read a lot of, or thousands or hundreds of books that helped me understand the world and how people think. And that has shaped up my thinking skills, and it has given me that communicational zest needed as an author to, of course, give voice to Gambian literature. But it's not something that is learned anywhere at any school or institution. It is a natural gift, because the Bible tells us in Romans chapter 3 verse 4, let God be the truth and every man a liar. The Bible says in John chapter 3 verse 6 that that which is born of the flesh is the flesh, and anything that is born of the spirit is also the spirit. So I am born of the spirit in flesh to be able to give the words and commandment and fulfillment of God. It reminds me quickly of the author, the South African author, when he was asked, why do you write? He said, I write because I have the power to take the whole of mankind up there in the sky. That is why I write. And that is why I write, because I have the gift to address issues and people listen to me. I have a voice that is so sharp and communicative. And I write to actually write what is wrong. With great aplomb, I do this.
Your communication skills also came from writing. They said all good writers are good speakers. How true is that?
Very true. All writers are very fluent people who can talk a lot, but they do not choose to talk, they choose to write. Because what they are going to say is what they put in words for people to read. So they have a very good communication skills. Some of them go to schools or they attend courses, etc. They take some short courses to, you know, shaping up their communication skills, but some are different. They are born naturally. Like, for example, William Shakespeare stopped at primary 4. He died in 1616, about 400 and something years ago. Up to now, he's the #1 writer on this planet. You know, so it's not about degrees, it's not about school and all those things. It is a natural gift, but it is also it requires an amount of hard work and passion and dedication, you know, so because people are different. And I implore on Gambian writers all the time. I say when they write, let them not just write for the sake of writing, but the reason why Nigerians and their books and Senegalese and other people, they're able to make name in literature is because of what they write. The amount of time and energy and artwork that they put in that book obviously goes beyond the boundaries of their countries. Anybody, anywhere can read and understand, but Gambians limit their writings so low. I mean, the quality too needs improvement. Wow. So that's why what I write, I don't limit it to the boundaries of the Gambia. I look at the world with 4 pair of eyes to be able to address issues that are global.
Wow, interesting. Interesting. Modoulamin, you may mention that you have traveled out of the country. And how long have you been there? And have your travel experience molded you to be a better person? Like, if you were here, not traveled, would you actually change a thing? Like when you started writing here or outside? So I want to ask this question. Did the travel experience and the time you spent outside molded you to a better person that you are right now? Like the person that you are? Has it contributed to the person that you are right now?
Yes, the short answer is yes, it has. In fact, traveling has helped me a lot. If I haven't traveled outside the Gambia, My wisdom, my education, talent was just going to be just at one space of my lifetime. I was not going to see the world with these eyes that I am looking at, because the Gambia is in a corner. You wouldn't know you are in a cornerstone. You're just been caged somewhere until you travel. Because while in the Gambia going to school as a student, I read about the Mali Empire, Ghana Empire, Songhai Empire. I read about the Sokoto Caliphate in Nigeria in books. I read about Egusi soup and Simovita and stuff like that. I never knew what they were talking about until I left the Gambia and traveled. When I found myself in Timbuktu, Gao in Mali, they have the biggest library in Africa with more than thousands of collections of artifacts. You know, I went up to Mali Empire. I saw the stones, the mountains, and I knew for centuries people live here. Egypt, the same thing at the pyramids. So there are a lot of African. I have traveled the world to 15 different countries, you know, across Africa. So I have a very solid background in terms of traveling, and that has helped me a lot in terms of writing, because it has awakened my senses of humanity and that vision to see beyond the boundaries of the Gambia. Because at that time, when I was much younger, when I write, I try to address things that were within my knowledge. That was where my knowledge stopped. But as you travel, in fact, traveling is a school. It is a school of its own that teaches you what you don't learn within the four corners of the classroom. Traveling is higher than a university. That is why travelers are so aware, because they encounter different people, different tribes, different cultures, different situations. Let me gist you a little bit. I wouldn't name the country just because it's media. Now, one of the countries I have been to is an African country, has given me so much awareness. Because for the first time in my life, I witnessed where a human being, a thief, was born into ashes right before my eyes. You know, at the market, it happened at the marketplace when the women were so busy, the vendors, vegetable sellers, when a gentleman stole a baby and put the baby in the curtain, and then lifted the curtain, placed it on his head. He was finding his way when the baby cried. And the women shouted a word and they engulfed the man. He was surrounded. He was in the middle. Before he realized what was happening, people rushed to the petrol station and brought a bottle of petrol with a tire and hung the tire around him. And they bathed him with petrol until he smelled. He was lit to death. He burned into ashes. I looked at that. And within no time, everybody returned to their various or daily businesses. That served as a lesson to me, because I'm from the Gambia, where we don't know those things. We might beat you, but we will take you to the police station, for example. So having seen that for the first time, it was something else for me as a writer. In fact, I decided to write a particular, story about that. In one of my books, I tried to inculcate that into my writing, because I am very good at incorporating our local languages into my writing. I do not only have to write in English or French, but also to write in Wolof, or to write in Fula or Mandinka, because these are my own languages. Another incident that I happened to learn, which has helped me a lot in my writing, is about religion. I've been to one African country that is the people are so religious that even when I went there for the first 3 months, they thought I was a Christian. I didn't have friends for 3 good months. I was a teacher. I taught English as a foreign language, in lycée, college, secondary, up to university. But because of the way I dress, and they didn't probably see me talking, I don't speak their language, so they thought I was a Christian, because it's a pure Muslim country. Like in the Gambia during Ramadan, you see how the masjids are full with people. For that place, they don't wait for Ramadan. Every day is like that. They pray in public. The people are so pious. So having seen that outside and many other things, they have added a lot of value, to my writing. And that's why when I write, you're going to read 3 things: religion, philosophy, and you're going to read etiquette or morals. I am very good at conveying moral lessons in my writing, because I am being very careful of writing, because when I die, what I write is going to be left here and people are going to consume them and read them. So I try to put in things that teaches critical consciousness and righteousness, things that teach virtue and morality. In that way, I should be able to fulfill my obligation as an author before I depart.
Thank you so much. We know that you are young, and I can say you are the second generation of Gambian literature in this country, because we have found the lives of Dr. Leonard Peters and Nana Gray Johnson respectively. Each of them have contributed to Gambian literature. What have you learned from them, and what have you learned from those pioneers of Gambian literature?
Thank you very much. I've learned a lot from them because their generation was competitive. Competitive in the sense that they were able to compete in terms of knowledge, in terms of seeking knowledge, reading and working hard in terms of building their nation or our country. They have done a lot so far, but my generation is totally different. And during their time, they did not have the opportunities we have. Like by then, technology was very, very young. It was a fetus. It wasn't even born by then. But now technology is a grown-up man with beards. You can sit in your house, you just click the mouse, you are there. At that time, they don't have those facilities. But it has helped them to be better writers than us because they were able to read a lot. They were able to research. They were able to attend very good schools like Fora Bay College. They have to leave the Gambia. Some of them have to go all the way down to Sierra Leone. Some people, Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah University, just to learn to come back and serve our country. But this younger generation, my generation, is different because I studied library and information for my undergraduate. And when I read library and information, as an information literate, I understand that there is a mental digital shift in technology. I'm using a technological term here. Mental digital shift. Mentally, digitally, the minds of the people shift. That means that when you and I were much younger, we used to have telephone booths where you put coins to make phone calls. After that, what came? The home line, telephone lines, 448, you call, hello, that too has antiquated, it's gone. Now, what was replaced? 3310, 1200, that Nokia phone, Siemens, Motorola came. Now we don't see them. Android dominated iPhone. So who knows, probably in the next 100 years to come, people will have TV phones, not iPhone, TV phones. You just sit in your house, watch TV in your phone. So technology evolves a lot. That is my time. These are the opportunities we have because during the time of the first era or generation of Gambian literature, the likes of Dr. Landon Peters, the likes of Nana Gray Johnson, Suwaibu Konate, etc., they don't have those opportunities. They don't have the chances we have. And I think we should make the best use of this opportunity by not abusing it.
Thank you. Emil, we have touched so many topics, like different topics. For you, what advice do you have, not for only Gambian people, but readers? If we want to read, what should we read exactly? What topics should we read on?
Yes, thank you very much. I think this is a very important question. For you to be knowledgeable, for you to be good in terms of anything you are doing, there is no shortcut to success. It's just one thing, God. He is the first, He is the last, He is everything. In fact, that is why the Bible tells us in Ecclesiastes chapter 12 verse 1 that remember also your Lord, your Creator, in the days of your youth before the doomsday come. What is God saying? That you should remember your Creator in the days of your youth when you are young before the doomsday, meaning the evil day, judgment day comes. So that simply means that the best time to learn is any time, but of course when you are young. In my book, don't judge the book by the cover. I was trying to give a response to the whole world because scientists are trying to still know at what age does a child understand. Up to now, scientists are doing the research. Now, from my own understanding and wisdom, I said a child begins to understand at the age of 7. And that's what I said in my book. That's why Don't Judge the Book by the Cover became my magnum opus I think I should come down to your level. Greatest literary work in literature. It became the book that sold me out. Don't judge the book by the cover, because not just the title, but what is in the book too is powerful. I was able to give this scientific response that the age that a child begins to understand is at the age of 7. And that was why the main character in the book, Fatu, was 7 years old. At age 7, she could spell all the words in the world. She became a genius speller, you know, with the help of a magic pen that was given to her by a jinn. But anytime she lost the pen, she lost her intelligence. Yeah. So it's a very interesting story with moral lessons to learn from. But I'm going to leave you and my viewers, of course, to read the book, to get to know more about it. But answering your question still about reading is to read in the name of God. Everything in this world is in the Bible and Quran. If you can read them and understand them, it opens doors for you to easily know, understand, access other things very easily, even if you don't study them, because that is the key to wisdom, is the key to knowledge.
Thank you so much, Musaf Sowe. What final word do you have for the show?
Yes, thank you very much. I will use my final words to tell my wonderful viewers that they should follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Go follow Eco TV International, the people's choice, because they are doing an amazing work and I admire everything I see so far. And I would like to use my final words to thank the entire management, starting from yourself, the host, and I will thank my beautiful colleague and sister, Aisatu, and those at the technical side, the staff and management of Eco TV International. I want to thank you in a very special way by doing this, by saying that the Bible says in Matthew chapter 5 verse 8 that blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see the Lord. You're not all an exception. Of course, the Hinduism book said in Bhagavad Gita chapter 29 verse 9 that I look upon all the creation of God the Almighty. I've seen none more dear than you, my dear audience. The Holy Quran says in Surah Al-Hadid chapter 57 verse 10 that those who spend in charity shall be richly rewarded, and you shall be richly rewarded because this is charity. Thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you so much, viewers, for watching. That was all we have for you today on the Chit Chat with me, Father Sanyang, and of course with my gentleman, Mohammed H. Al-Musaf Sowe. Thank you so much for watching. I was Father Sanyang, your host. You can follow us online on Eco TV International, the people's choice. Thank you so much. Until next time.